Hello. Thank you everyone for being here. Great day today. I know there's stiff competition going on at the moment, so I appreciate everyone's time and attention. I really hope that I have an interesting talk here ready for you, and I can guarantee that people will leave here with a different perspective of nutrition, a different kind of appreciation for their bodies, and really what we can do to tap into our greatest potential. Just before I start, kind of show of hands, anyone familiar with nutrition or consider themselves pretty familiar with nutrition? Okay, good amount of people. Some people, anyone feel like you don't really know much at all? Show of hands. A few people as well. I do know that I've been doing this for quite a while, and often nutrition is kind of viewed as this sometimes insurmountable mountain, in terms of our understanding of it. Where do I begin? Because I'm constantly hearing in the paper or in the magazine or on the internet, oh, don't have this or I need more of this. And it becomes this very confusing and muddled feel, and we're really not sure what to make of anything. And it's really not that. It's not what it's portrayed to you at all. Now, I will kind of show you some of the great potential and the really interesting things that insights are coming out. But primarily, I want to change the way you think about nutrition, think about your body, and definitely leave you with some steps real life steps you can implement to make yourselves feel better and start noticing that. And I think that's the most important thing. So let me make sure everything works here, and we'll fire right ahead. So just to give you a bit of background information about myself, I am Director of Research Development at ReviveActive. We're a health supplement company. We're based out of Galway. We produce all our health supplements in Ireland. We've been around since 2011. Myself, I come from a strange kind of background. I have degrees in biology, biochemistry, and chemistry, but I actually ended up working for a pharmaceutical company right out of college for a number of years. I did drug development. So I actually helped develop and do research on new medications, primarily focusing on things like diabetes, anti-obesity, anti-depression medication. But something I realized in my tenure in pharmaceuticals is I started kind of peeling back the layers and figuring out that a lot of these new pharmaceutical compounds we're working off are based off of food components. They're based off of natural food mechanisms and genetic mechanisms that exist in our body. So I started wondering really what's kind of going on. And the pharmaceutical industry, particularly, surprise, I'm American, some people have figured that out, but particularly in America, it's an interesting field in how they approach things. And a lot of times, we're purifying components of food, but we're just kind of slightly changing the molecular structure really to make it patentable and things like this. But really, the thing that I primarily learned within this is that the real power of nutrition and the underlying principles that were really being utilized even within a pharmaceutical industry. And if you actually look at any pharmaceutical industry, a large portion of what they research and what they allocate their funding to is actually nutraceutical research, the nutrition side of what they want to achieve. So the two are very linked. So this kind of drove me to want to do my doctorate and study nutrition a bit more. I have a PhD in physiology, and then I spent some time working for a nutrigenomics laboratory. Anyone familiar with nutrigenomics? It's basically just how nutrition changes your genome. Now, I think some people might still believe that, our genes are kind of like these blueprints that we're given when we're born, that are passed on from our parents, and that's who we are. That's our coding for the rest of our lives. That's absolutely not true. It's absolutely false. You can constantly change your genes, both acutely and chronically. Sometimes over the course of a day, sometimes over the course of a year. You can turn genes on and off, you can upregulate them, downregulate them, and all of this impacts our physiology, impacts our bodies, and in turn impacts how we feel and how we're able to utilize our bodies. So understanding this really led to a bigger kind of appreciation for how all of these things work together, and that we wanted to take a different approach in terms of how we formulate these health supplements, how we want to approach nutrition, and of course a big area of that is understanding first and then implementation, how we can actually change things about our lives. So I'll start right off. As I said, I come from a physiology background. I spent a lot of my time in endocrinology doing diabetes, metabolism, research. So primarily right off the bat, I want to drive home this understanding that your network is this amazing machine, or your body is this amazing machine, but it is a network. Sometimes when we think of nutrition and we look at how we approach nutrition, it can be very, very linear. Step A, step B, step C. And that's not at all how it works. Our body is a network. All of our systems are connected. When I talk about our cardiovascular system, I often pull into our immune system and into our nervous system. All of these things are correlated. Even sometimes when I talk about the importance of your skeletal system and how that correlates with your immune system, people often, well, what does my bones have to do with my immune system? We think of even our bones as just the scaffolding in our body, just something that holds us up, something we need to worry about calcium with. But that's not true at all. Our bones are actually where our immune cells are made, and a compromised skeletal system can, in turn, relate to a compromised immune system. So it's understanding about how all these systems are connected and form a network and really rely on one another to really get the most out of our physiology, the most out of our anatomy, and therefore tap into our greatest potential within our bodies. So this idea and this view that everything is connected, that even when we take a nutritional approach, we want to think of that whole body approach, targeting each aspect of our system. So first I kind of want to start off on really the big question. Do I really need to focus on nutrition? I've been to a lot of talks, I've been to a lot of different areas, and even not more than a couple months ago, I was at a conference in London, and I was talking to a surgeon, and we were even kind of talking about certain supplements and vitamins and minerals and things like this. And as a surgeon from the UK, he said a statement to me that just kind of really caught me off guard. And he was like, well, surely I'd be getting everything I needed from my body to be my best, or else I'd be dead. And I just couldn't get over that. I'm like, obviously there's a massive spectrum, a lot of middle ground between, optimal health, making sure that all your systems and everything in your body is working properly, and being dead. There's a massive middle ground in that. Sometimes I likened, when people don't understand when you're in a nutritional deficiency of something, what that feels like, because you're so adapted to it. I sometimes liken nutrition even to very much like other necessities of our body, like sleeping. Now, we all know that, the importance of sleep and having time to recover and rejuvenate. But as you know, sometimes, even from my college years, you can get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a day. You're not going to feel great. Your mental function's not going to be all there. You'll feel tired. You'll feel groggy. Your immune system will be compromised. You're more likely to get sick. But you can do that. You can get by on 4 or 5 hours a day if you really push yourself. But you're not going to feel your best, but you're not going to be dead. Living in a state of nutritional deficiency is often like this. Sometimes we don't even realize that we don't feel our best or that something is missing because we're so adapted to it. But if you consider going out of that 4 or 5 hours sleep and getting that 8 hours of sleep a night, that full night's rest, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is what, it feels like to wake up and not be groggy, to have that mental capacity, to have that energy throughout the day. So it's understanding these are basic things that your body needs and is looking for. But the focus on nutrition is really paramount. This is something that hasn't changed, and if anything, it's actually only growing because the world is changing. It wasn't really even that long ago that, if you lived into your 50s, your 60s, that was a long lifespan and you were doing really good. But now we're living into 100 and we're even pushing that. Our lifespans are becoming dramatically longer, but our bodies and our physiology haven't quite adjusted to that. We still have these slowing of important processes, cellular processes that are becoming less efficient as we age. So that need to focus on nutrition, particularly as we aging, isn't going away. If anything, it's becoming more and more important. So even when we consider 100 years ago, we were all locavores. Anyone have any idea what a locavore is? Exactly. Pretty much everything you eat, produce, is produced locally. Meals were prepared fresh, of course. Things like margarine, they didn't exist. There were no frozen foods. There were no snack foods. And all of these are changing the landscape of our nutritional culture. All these are influencing us. Now, even outside of that, the way they're producing food is changing. Food is being reduced for convenience, not for nutrition. Demand for quicker food, which lasts longer, has reshaped their diet. But this is having a great impact on actual nutrition we're getting from our food. Freezing your food can reduce vitamin C content by 30%, for example. Canning reduces thiamine by 40%, and overcooking can reduce folic acid by 70%. These are things that, again, are changing our landscape, not the same nutritional content that we used to have at one point. Even when you even consider commercial farming, over-farming the same soil is depleting nutrients from our soil right there. We know that even a head of broccoli, which produced 30, 40 years ago, does not have the same nutritional content as one now. So we need to kind of understand that we're not living in the same lifestyle in terms of our hunter-gatherers ancestors were. Our lifestyle and the food that is available to us is very different, and it's influencing us, and it's not influenced often in a positive way. And when you compound that with our longer lives, this is something that is really feeding into this increased prevalence we're seeing of obesity and cardiovascular disease and depression and cancer and Alzheimer's all over. All of these factors are contributing to this. So even considering that food it's driven by profit, our industry has shaped our diet to increasingly focus on meat, dairy, corn, and fat, driving excessive caloric intake. Overconsumption of animal products and junk food, but neither are required for health, but both are marketed very heavily towards you. Again, the basic bottom line here, the goal is quantity, not quality. Food is not being produced for nutritional content, it's being produced so it lasts longer, you can ship it, it'll sit on the shelf longer, things like this. So it's something we need to understand that our nutritional input is not exactly the same as it used to be, so we just need to focus a bit more. According to the Mental Health Foundation, for example, vegetable consumption has decreased 34% and fish consumption has decreased 59%. Both these are very important, particularly the fish I'll come back to in a little bit later. But whether it's picky eating, suboptimal digestion, or we just find ourselves too busy running around, it's becoming increasingly difficult to meet our nutritional demands. So again, something we need to focus on, but there's a lot of power to be had here, and I will make some very basic, simple steps that we can implement and things that we will feel very quickly. So let's get right into it. That was kind of my foundation, setting the stage. Why is nutrition important and how things have kind of changed for us. Now we'll start getting into the interesting stuff, the fun stuff. What is biohacking? You're all here. You're all experts. Someone want to tell me? It's a really interesting field, and it's funny. I was talking to some of my friends, and when I was telling me what I was doing about here, immediately that hacking always brings them back to computer science stuff, and they imagine me in a little laptop and doing stuff like this, but it's not that at all. What really is biohacking? And I think this is a perfect image for kind of what I want to kind of talk about. But essentially, biohacking is the understanding and the implementation of changes to a lifestyle to essentially hack your physiology for optimal health and feeling. Now think back when I was kind of talking about the power of nutrigenomics, that nutrition can actually change your genes. A lot of things can change your genes, both internal stimulus and external stimulus. Not only what you're putting into your body, but what you're doing with your body. Both of these can actually change the blueprints that make you. And that's a profound kind of thing to think about. But this is really just the start. This is the tip of the iceberg. Biohacking can involve a lot of things. It can involve your movement, your lifestyle, how active you are, how you sleep, how you actually structure your sleep patterns, making sure you're getting optimal sleep. And I mean, this can include everything from not looking at screens, for an hour or two before you sleep, because this causes hyperactivity in the brain. All these things to improve different aspects of our lives. And something I really want to drive home is understanding is that all these are connected. Very much like our body, our internal systems, the cardiovascular, our immune system, all of these are connected. We are a network. All these aspects of our lives are a network. And it's important that we take this kind of holistic, whole body approach to it. Our environment, the environment that we keep ourselves, we find ourselves in, how we focus our attention, how we deal with stress and even stress at work, and of course, nutrition. These are just a sample, some of the aspects of our lives that are being altered and factoring into how we are biohacking ourselves to improve our lifestyles, to improve our physiology, and to improve what we're getting out of ourselves. So I love this picture. The human machine. This one's an American. I know, for sure. The body is a machine, an amazing, phenomenal machine. It's the greatest gift you'll ever have, and it's capable of amazing, insane things. I mean, I love science, I love medicine, and I will never be not impressed by new things I learn every day of what the human body is capable of. Even just a week or two, I was reading a story of a girl who was suffering from seizures to the point that they were actually going to kill her. She was suffering from such intense seizures. But the neurosurgeons who were working on her and studied her found that these seizures were really isolated and coming from one hemisphere of the brain. And they really weren't left with much of a choice, but some of the kind of crazier surgeons in the background kind of, what if we cut half her brain out? That was the only option. And they did. They essentially opened her up, right down, divided the two hemispheres, and took out the half of the brain which the seizures were originating from. Immediately like that, the brain started to rewire itself. It realized what was happening. It started to go into its own kind of mechanism where it was starting to take over the entire body and rewiring itself to take control of everything with that other hemisphere gone. It was almost like there was a recognition within the biology that that area was toxic. That girl's fine now. She's pretty much walking, talking, completely on par with other girls her age, and she does not suffer from seizures. That is an amazing thing. But it's just kind of a little tiny sample to really drive home how insane and beautiful and incredible the human machine is. But it's like a machine. It's not perfect. What happens if you have a beautiful car and you leave it in the garage, you don't do anything with it? It's going to rust, it's going to break down, it's going to start not functioning properly, and if you want to get it back on the road, it's going to be that much harder to do because now you have a lot of work to do, you have rust to shake off, you have to clean things up. But if you take that same car from the start and you take it out on the road and you use it, you put good fuel on it, you take good care of it, that thing will last forever. Not forever, but nearly forever. But there's a massive difference between how we approach, but we need to understand that, I just find it fascinating that we're so sometimes materialistic with our lives and we care so much about our cars or our TVs or what's in our house, but Jesus, the most important thing you will ever have is you, and it's right there. So taking care of it is important. But the human body is a machine. It responds to what you put into it, and then what you do, your activity determines what happens to that fuel, that food that you put in. So these are two parts of the equations, but of course they're completely tied and linked to one another. So what happens if we take that human machine and we keep putting poor fuel into it? High carbohydrate, high saturated fats, poor vegetables, poor fruit allocations. What happens to that body, that human machine? It's going to start to break down. So this is one of the biggest things that will start happening as your body breaks down. And this is one of my biggest areas of passion and focus, and it is inflammation. Why am I so obsessed with inflammation? Because it is seriously, almost quite literally, underpinning every serious disease out there. Inflammation can be directly correlated to the progression and development of everything from diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurological disease, things like Alzheimer's, autoimmune disease, arthritis, pulmonary disease, and even cancer as well. All of these things can be related and exacerbated by inflammation. So, what is inflammation? It's a natural response. A couple weeks ago, my girlfriend twisted her ankle, and she was in pain, and obviously down on the couch. And immediately I'm like, oh, look at the swelling and, the blood getting, and I'm obsessing about her. And she's like, Jesus, just get ice. But you can see this inflammatory response within her ankle. I mean, I know she's in pain, but it's just so cool at the same time. But I mean, that inflammatory response is happening because the body realizes damage and it's trying to repair. Even that swelling, that increase in heat, that increase in circulation, all of these are factoring in the body's response to repair itself, to get to that damaged tissue, and to help make it right. What happens when inflammation goes bad is what we call as chronic inflammation. This is where that inflammatory response goes to get a bit haywire. It's one of the main things that actually is underlying within diabetes. You have this chronic inflammation which starts making you resistant to normal stimulus that are trying to occur in your body, whether it be something like insulin, something like nitric oxide in your blood vessels, and it's having all these influences, making you diabetic, it's making you develop cardiovascular disease, because inflammation is not something that's supposed to be going haywire. So if I can explain the inflammatory response in the immune system very basically, very simply, this is your body. This is your beautiful body, your castle, your home. This is everything you are, everything that's important to you. Here is your immune system. I just picked a random cell type macrophages. These are the guys who are going to protect your castle. These are colds and flus. These are everything that's running around in the streets of Dublin right now that is getting everyone sick. Awful, nasty things. They want in here. This is where they thrive. This is where they'll make more. Your immune system is there to stop them, to defend you. What happens when you have a good inflammatory response is these pathogens show up, and your immune system cells, they come out and they defend off and they protect your castle. What happens if you have chronic inflammation? Well, these guys are always out running around, and now they're exhausted. They're tired, their equipment's broken, they're not able to function properly. They're so riled up from chronic inflammation, they're not only attacking, if there's nothing to attack like these pathogens, they'll start attacking your castle. They'll quite literally start attacking you as well. And this response is what really gets chaotic and crazy and start damaging our tissues, start damaging even our genes, our DNA. It can have a profound destructive response, but it's something that you have to understand is needed. We need that inflammatory response to protect us from disease, but we need to stop that chronic inflammation. But this is something almost everyone suffers from, is some form of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation can be resulting in headaches, even hemorrhoids. It can be resulting in heart palpitations. It can be resulting in rashes. All of these things can often be tied to underpinnings within the physiology of chronic inflammation, all driven by poor diet and poor lifestyle. These high caloric, high carbohydrates, high bad fat diets, which are putting our body in these compromised situations. So my first tip on what we can start doing to implement to better regulate inflammation and to start, because this is what I want to do. I don't want to just kind of talk about stuff. I want to try to give you some basic things that we can start doing and thinking about implementing in our lives. And here are some of the, the first steps that will make the most profound change. So the reversed ratio. This is one thing I've been fascinated with because it's not only very physiologically related, but it's very historical related, which is the omega-3, omega-6, and 9 kind of ratio. Anyone familiar with omega-3 fatty acids? Yeah, it's something that we're hearing more and more, right? Particularly you're kind of seeing them out there in, your fish oils and your krill oils. I mean, this is essentially, it's a healthy fat that we often get from fish. Some fish are better sources than others, but in essential, almost all fish will give you some good sources of omega-3 fatty acids. You can get them a lot of other places as well, your flax seeds, a lot of your nuts, lentils, things like these. These are great sources of these omega-3. Now, this is a great fat. This is a very healthy, positive fat. The reason is because when we intake omega-3 fatty acids into our body, they actually help to produce signals which actually help to dampen our inflammatory response, to help bring that inflammation down so it's not too inflammatory. On the other hand, the omega-6s, which we get a lot when we're going to the chipper, when you're getting those chips, you're getting any kind of fried anything or fried crisp and, all of these things. This is where you're getting your omega-6s. And when omega-6s come into your body, they actually produce pro-inflammatory signals. So you can imagine if you're an individual and you keep taking lots of omega-6s and you're going to the chipper all the time, this is driving inflammation crazy. All those omega-6s are being converted into inflammatory signals and it's driving inflammation up. And that's what's getting us back to that kind of underpinning of that disease mechanism. Now, the amazing thing is that these are actually converted in the same process, both omega-6s and omega-3s. So within your body, if you have nothing but omega-6s, that process is going to keep churning out these inflammatory signals. It's going to drive inflammation. It's going to start leading to weight gain. It's going to start leading to cardiovascular disease. It's going to start leading to you feeling pretty awful. But if you start filtering in omega-3 fatty acids into that ratio, that same process is trying to churn them out. So you'll start occupying some of those spaces and pushing out the omega-6s, which can't be converted, and you'll start converting more omega-3s. Imagine it kind of like, I try to liken it sometimes to like a car ride. If you're going from Galway to Dublin, if you're bringing a bunch of people who are very inflammatory, by the time you get to that that end journey, whether you're going to Galway or Dublin, it's going to be awful. It's going to be just a very explosive response. But if you kind of balance it, or if you have more non-inflammatory people, that'll help kind of dampen that signal, and by the time you get there, you have a much more regulated response. The issue is that we don't nearly get enough omega-3s now. We used to. Our ancestors had a much more kind of one-to-one ratio of their omega-3s to omega-6s based on their diet. There was a lot of fish, there was a lot of nuts, there was a lot of foraging, things like this. But now in our kind of high-fat age of nutritional convenience, all of that has changed, and we get far more omega-6s than omega-9s. But this is one of the basic things we can actually use to start modulating our inflammation, to actually start biohacking ourselves, is changing this omega-3 to omega-6 ratio in our diet. It's something that's really not that hard to do. It's just something that we need to think about more. Anytime that you're having that chipper, or you're having these high omega-6s, try to balance that out. Go for a portion of fish, or go for some flaxseed, or try to incorporate things into that are kind of balance out that ratio a bit more. So this is kind of what I was just talking about here. So our Western diets usually significant imbalance of high omega-6s and minimal omega-3 consumption. This is what's driving all that inflammation, and balancing this ratio is a powerful strategy in helping modulating our inflammatory response. Here's some good examples. If anyone's curious or wants the presentation as well, you can just email me. I'll send it on to you. But just some good examples, and we can see, this. I'm never great at using a clicker. We want to be down here, this high omega-3 diet, steering away from this high omega-6, high inflammation diet. But you can even kind of see, the breakdown when we look at some of the things that might be included in our diet. When you're getting that sunflower oil, or you're getting that cornstarch, or things like this, we're getting a lot of our omega-6s, things that are found in a lot of the food products. You'll go into any shop, any kind of restaurant, and you'll see there. But down here, we're not getting enough of our nuts. We're not getting enough of our flaxseed, our fish. These are great sources of omega-3s just to kind of balance this out. This is one of the biggest things that 99.9% of people, are just suffering from, but they don't realize, but something that we could take into our hands and start making some beneficial changes as well. Another one, antioxidants. This is really important for me. I do a lot of work sometimes with like high caliber athletes. And it's amazing when you kind of sometimes do a cardiovascular screening. So you can have, this high caliber athlete, man, he looks, real fit, real ripped, very active and stuff. I kind of start talking about his diet, what he's doing. You do a cardiovascular screening on him. And particularly some, American football players, NFL people are very, very much within this box. You do a cardiovascular screening on them, and it looks like they have the cardiovascular system of an 80-year-old. And they're in their 30s, and, they're running all the time, and they're very active, and they don't understand why that is. It's a very basic equation which exists in the body. Anytime you go to use energy, you have this metabolic process. And you can imagine it like your body takes in all your components of your food. It takes in your proteins. It takes in your carbohydrates. It takes in your lipids, or it takes in your fats. It takes all these in, and it starts blowing these up within the mitochondria of your cell to produce energy, right? Because you want to explode these things to unlock that energy within that food. I can actually hear them shouting out there. They are having the crack out there. Come on, everyone, start shouting. Okay. Biohacking, biohacking. They're mad, though. I love them. But you can imagine, so within your cells, you have this blast furnace, this mitochondria, which is producing all this energy. But as we're doing this, is we're naturally producing energy and we're exploding these components of our food to unlock that energy, we inadvertently have this unfortunate byproduct, which we call free radicals. Imagine it kind of like shrapnel. So, you have a component of food, this molecule, there's energy locked in there, you want to release it, you explode it. Sometimes you kind of get shrapnel, which is damaging. So what these shrapnel do, these free radicals, these are essentially particles that are missing a piece of themselves. And that's a result of that explosion, that natural explosion trying to make energy within your cells in your body. The bad thing about this is those particles which are missing a piece of themselves are now looking to complete themselves, and they will take a piece of you. They might take a piece of your tissue, a piece of your DNA, a piece of a component of one of your cells. These are damaging. These are damaging things. And I'll actually, in the next slide, I'll talk about what it does in your cardiovascular system. But when these free radicals are left unchecked, they will ravage whatever is around them. They will start destroying systems. And this is just a product of just being ourselves. So when you take that athlete, that person who is very fit and goes to gym all the time, I start talking about, talk to them, and I find out that their diet is not that great, but because they look very physically fit and they're very active, that, the diet is not the primary focus of them. But what happens is with all that energy output, they have a lot of free radical production, a lot of free radical. And that's just a consequence of high metabolism, high energy production, high byproduct production. So even someone like an athlete who's not focusing on the basics enough to making sure that they're actually, dealing with their high relative rates of metabolism and activity, clearing out these free radicals of their body, they could be doing damage within their cardiovascular system. But that's just one way to actually, have these free radicals being produced within your body. There's a lot of things that are driving them. It's not just the mitochondria. It's not just our cells metabolizing, producing energy. It's often UV light. It can be radiation. Smoking is a big one. Air pollution, and of course, back to here, inflammation, all can drive DNA damage. So here's your free radical here. This is the mean particle. He's very angry. And he's missing a piece of himself, and he wants to complete, so he's going to look to take a piece of you. The great thing about our antioxidants is they help complete this, and they help to complement this free radical and clear it out of your body so it doesn't damage you, it doesn't harm you. And that process about which these free radicals are damaging in you and harming you is known as oxidative stress. One of the biggest things that oxidative stress is going to do wrong is within the cardiovascular system. And again, when I kind of go back to that, understanding this network and how every system is important and how every system feeds into each other, when you have a compromised cardiovascular system, this has a knock-on effect to every aspect of your body. A compromised cardiovascular system, you have reduced circulation. That's reduced blood flow, reduced nutrient transport. Your cells aren't getting the oxygen and nutrients that it needs. This starts slowing down the function of your other systems, whether it be your brain, your endocrinology system. All of these things are starting to be compromised. Again, when we think of our body, we have to think of this network, and the body is only as strong as its weakest link. If there's one of those systems which is compromised or not functioning properly, it can actually pull the function of the others down. So, for example, oxidative stress in our cardiovascular system. What does it do? Well, first, excess free radicals driving that oxidative stress. What's the first it's going to do? It's going to cause depletion of whatever antioxidants you have. So now you don't have antioxidants. This is going to drive that chronic inflammation that I talked about. So you start having inflammation going up in your body because these free radicals are damaging everything, and we don't have the antioxidant supply to help clear them and get rid of them. This chronic inflammation is going to start causing the hardening of blood vessels. That, again, causes fatigue, reduced circulation, reduced blood flow. This can actually cause depression as well. I have another slide that will talk about this in one moment. But basically, the best analogy and the best visual I can kind of give you is if this is like your arteries, your cardiovascular system, good, healthy arteries and veins, good space for blood flow, that oxidative stress is very similar to oxidation, which turns that into this. You can imagine the difference between your blood vessels when they're not functioning properly, when we damage from oxidative stress. This same process that causes the hardening here. So this is something that, again, if left unchecked, starts feeding into itself. That oxidative damage keeps going, keeps driving inflammation, and it turns into a vicious cycle. So I was talking about the importance of linking these systems and understanding these, and how important not only the cardiovascular system is, because it ties into other aspects of our lives. And I really want to kind of drive home this idea of this not only network internally within our bodies, how important all our systems are, but this network externally as well. How this feeds into our social life, how it feeds into our activity, how it feeds into our perception of things. All of these is very important, but it often all begins and starts with the body. It starts with what you put in, that fuel, that nutrition, to begin with that. Because there is very much a connection between the heart and the brain. And cardiovascular disease has actually been shown to exhibit a high comorbidity with depression. This is all underpinned by this increased oxidative stress. It drives inflammation within the body. It increases the hardening of the blood vessels, reducing that circulation and blood flow. Decreases oxygen into the brain, decreases nutrient transport to the brain, and decreases energy. So, I mean, even those last kind of few, when you start having, a slowed down, compromised kind of cognitive function, mental performance, but you're also having reduced energy, you're much more tired, you're not even sleeping well anymore. All of these things can factor in not only your physiological state, but all of a sudden your mental state, because all of these are connected. Mental health, physical health, and social health. And we talked a lot about physical health, just kind of basic understanding about our bodies, the importance of nutrition, and things that we could start doing to get us right on the right track. These are really just the first steps, but I think these are really good steps that we can implement. That the mental health, physical health, social health, closely interwoven factors, all correlated and important with one another. And this increased prevalence of depression in Western countries has been accompanied by parallel increased prevalence of cardiovascular disease and fundamental changes in dietary habits. So again, even when you have a poor diet, you don't have the right energy, you're not functioning properly, that's going to lead to a poor lifestyle. That poor lifestyle of not being very active, being tired all the time, not wanting to engage, going to interactive is going to lead to a poor social lifestyle. So all of these things are important. And it comes back to that viewing the body as this amazing, incredible machine with all these important systems which are relying, dependent on you to give them what they need to function, to make sure they have the correct macronutrients as well as your micronutrients, making sure you're not deficient in certain things, and just beginning to start basic implemental steps. So when it comes to food, we can look to actually target anti-inflammatory food, things which have been shown to actually help to modulate our inflammatory response much better and start getting us on the right course. And I guarantee if you start doing this, you will start feeling it, you will start noticing it. Everything from how you are throughout the day to how you wake up to how you are prepared to go to sleep when you actually go to sleep. But some good food options to kind of just start with are things like spinach, grapefruit, peppers, almonds, and garlic. Now picture each of those because it kind of goes into my basic simple point that anyone can remember and take home here. And it's just trying to make things easy and practical. Just eat a rainbow. That's it. It's a real simple tip, but the reason I put up some of these is they all look very different, and often, even when we think of fruits and vegetables, the color spectrum which they have is very indicative of what they have in it. I come from an endocrinology background. I believe that the body needs a large spectrum of things, but also excess of anything is really where things go wrong. I've never been one to say that people shouldn't have anything. I've never been one to say, I have, sweet old ladies coming at me, oh, can I have a fry, or can I have, a bit of sugar in my tea? Yeah, no one stopped me from doing that. The thing is excess. Don't be having a fry every single day. Make it like, a treat thing every once in a while. Don't be having 12 cups of sugar a day with, teaspoons of sugar constantly in it. It's the excess that drives things poorly. Your body needs sugar. Your body needs fat. Without fat, you don't have an immune response. You don't have a proper functioning immune system. You don't need excessive fat. This is what drives excessive inflammation. This is what starts to dysregulate and cause issues. But very simple steps, thinking about how food is much more of a powerful tool than it is, to try to want to get many different things, to build that spectrum, to get a large array of vitamins and minerals and nutrients simply by eating a rainbow. When it comes to supplements, high-quality supplements are very good for filling in those gaps, particularly things that we're just not getting enough from our diet, particularly even some things that we're not getting from our diet at all that are really important that we focus on. Now, there's some obviously, key nutrients that we all need to focus on, particularly, vitamin D in this sunshine country that we live in. This is a really important one. This is a basic one. It is about kind of understanding and knowing a bit more about it. I mean, and what you need in terms of your physiology. If you're someone, who's concerned about osteopenia, osteoporosis, you're getting at that kind of point of your age. It's not just about calcium. It's about calcium and D3 and K2 and magnesium. It's about making sure that we are, approaching nutrition and supplementation in the right way, similar to how we would food. This is meant to fill in the gaps. This is meant to make sure that we're not getting in any nutritional deficiency. It all starts with your diet. It then goes with your lifestyle. This is really important to make sure that you are filling in those gaps, though, because those deficiencies can have a knock-on effect and slow everything else down. But if we are considering supplementation, we should always consider the best forms of supplementation. Things to kind of look out for, just those range of nutrients. You want to consider a good range of nutrients, targeting whatever you're looking for. The dosage is very important, the dosage of efficacy. Talk to your pharmacist, talk to your health food shop person, talk to your GP, making sure that you're getting adequate amounts of things. You can have tests done if you think you might be iron deficient or anything like this. The form of nutrient, this is something that I obsess about because I think it's really interesting and important. I mean, when people come in and to me and they tell me I'm taking zinc or they tell me I'm taking vitamin K, my first question is I need to be more specific. There are lots of different forms. There are lots of different effects of these different forms. Again, talking with your pharmacists, your health food people, they're really, honestly, I've been out there, I work with pharmacists within Lloyd's Pharmacy, massive pharmacies in the UK. A lot of them do have a good wealth of knowledge. If you approach them and you ask them, they can steer you in the right direction. And things like this, consider delivery. I'm never one for really tablets when it comes to health supplements. But again, look at this synergy of how they kind of all work together. Some of the examples, a couple I kind of just mentioned, some really great ones for beginning those first steps if we're looking to target something that maybe isn't working properly or we don't feel is working properly in our body. Again, the osteopenia, osteoporosis, we're thinking about D3 and K2. When it comes to energy, nutrients like CoQ10 and ribose are unreal for helping within the mitochondria, helping to promote that generation of energy. Vitamin E and selenium for the immune system. We kind of talked about that as well. Arginine and citrulline. These are great nutrients for improving cardiovascular health to help combat that pore constriction that we talked about. These help really to increase blood flow, increase circulation. One of the most fundamental important things, because think of this, your cardiovascular system is your highway, transporting blood, nutrients, everything, even your immune cells around to places they need to be. If it's not working well, everything is going to be compromised and slowing down. So, perfect timing, I know. I just got the 5 minutes as I went in closing. So just, in closing, I didn't want to bog you all down with a bunch of technical information, which was great for me because I feel like I do that all the time. I just kind of wanted to talk to you and kind of help realign your mindset in terms of how you think about nutrition, how important it is, really what we can get out of it, and trying to understand some basic changes that we can implement to get more out of ourselves and to help us show the value and the power of that nutrition. Number one, listen to and cherish your bodies. Real important. I mean, honestly, listen to yourself. So many times you know what's going on with you, and it's understanding that every single person is different. You're all special snowflakes. You're all unique and respond to different things in different ways. And everyone has a very unique physiology, which is like a fingerprint that doesn't match anyone else's. You will respond to nutritional stimulus very different from the next person to you, as well as lifestyle. Some people have to work real hard in the gym. to keep that thing, that infant body. Some people don't do anything and they just look like they're Greek gods, and I hate them. But like, everyone's different, and that's just how it is. And it's understanding that and making these changes into your body. Fuel your life with nutrition and physical activity. Two of the most important foundations that will help your body to be the best body that it can be. There we go. Less meats and carbs, more fruits and vegetables. Simple step. Well, it sounds simple. I know carbs are delicious, meats as well. But like, it's something, think of that balance. Anytime you go for something you know isn't really good, try to go for something that you know is good after that. If nothing else, it'll make you feel better, conscious-wise. Reduce inflammation by helping to increase this omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Very important, simple step. Really, you should be getting 4 or 5 portions of fish a week. Trying to work in those nuts, things that are high in the omega-3s, or chia seeds, things like this. Great source of this. Things you can just add into anything, whatever you're doing. Basic, simple step. The power of importance of antioxidants. Never forget these. Particularly, I do try to focus on these, particularly when I deal with athletes, because they have a misconception that they don't need them. Our very simple tip of Eat a Rainbow, something that we can all remember and try to implement a bit more. If you keep eating the same fruit, that's good that you're eating fruit, but if you keep eating the same thing every day, you're only going to get that spectrum of nutrients and minerals which is in there. Trying to expand that to a vast array will do wonders. And of course, high quality supplementation to help fill in these gaps, to making sure that we are getting everything that we need. There's no deficiency which is slowing anything down. But essentially, at the end of the day, just stay active, healthy, and happy. So that's everything. I appreciate your time. Any questions and answers? I know I'm probably running out of time in general. I will be around if I don't get to your question, but yeah, any questions, answer? Sorry? Sure. If anyone just wants my the presentation, you just email at Daniel, my name Daniel, at ReviveActive.com. So you can just email that and I will send on. We could have a chat. If you have any questions then. Yes, exactly. But yeah, if you do, I'm one of those people who I'll sit there and I'll just stare blankly and then I walk out of the room that was my question. And I'll think of it. So if you do have a question that pops you later, do not hesitate at all to email me, ask me if you have any questions about anything. Very happy to help any way I can. Yeah.
A question for you. There's a bit of a craze on CBD oil.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a hemp product. Have you come across that? Do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, in a pharmaceutical company, I actually, one of the areas I worked in were the cannabinoids. So I worked within cannabinoid receptors. CBD is one of the many spectrum of cannabinoids that exists in there. There's definitely physiological relevance. There is efficacy to using it in the right terms of dosage, the right kind of purity forms and stuff, and the right means. Is it for everyone? No, but it's not all a wash. There's definitely benefits to be had there for sure. That was the large area I used to study in terms of how these cannabinoids actually bind to receptors and the physiological responses they cause. So I know that is a very new kind of up and coming field, particularly with changes, in legislation in some areas. But yeah, there's efficacy there for sure. Yep.
A quick one for you.
Sure.
In your presentation, you mentioned less carbohydrates. So I'm
Yep.
just wondering why. Thanks. Why you said that? And I guess if you take out carbohydrates, which are a main macronutrient source, what do you replace it with? Because you also mentioned that not to consume too much fat.
A lot of times it's high refined carbohydrates. There's not a lot of nutritional value in there. It's just pure energy. It's pure energy, and excessive energy, you're just giving excessive caloric intake. You're not getting that kind of, again, that range of, broader range of macronutrients and micronutrients you need. Again, I'm not saying don't have carbohydrates at all. It's that we need to kind of diminish our input, particularly of these highly refined carbohydrates, which aren't giving us much nutritional value, and helping to balance that with other things, improving our, whether it be our fish intake, our fruit, vegetables, and our nut intake, things like that.
Beyond the lack of nutrients, do you see a metabolic difference in the profile of response depending on carbohydrates or fats?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just in terms of how these are metabolized and the effect that they have on the cytokines, you probably know yourself. We had a bit of a chat earlier. I think that particularly carbohydrates are jump-starting this kind of inflammatory response that is not being balanced, particularly on a chronic level. We're basically just eating too much of them for too long and not kind of mixing, other things in that we need to. Yeah.
Thanks. Just one
Sure.
final question, if that's okay. Which is, you mentioned, too much fat can also provoke an inflammatory response as well, and you particularly mentioned saturated fat as well. And maybe just to shed some light on it, there's a lot of talk about saturated fat and whether it's bad, whether it's good, whether it is a major risk factor for cardiovascular disease, or whether it causes inflammation. So, just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, the saturated fats particularly, again, when I say fats, there's a lot of different fats. We just talked about some healthy fats, which are omega-3 fatty acids. There's saturated fats, there's polyunsaturated fats, there's monounsaturated fatty acids. There's a load of spectrum of different types of fats and fatty acids. The saturated fats, in terms of they're not being utilized in terms of their structure and energy-wise by the body. They're not, again, kind of offering a lot. We did a big study in one of the companies I work with looking at some of the different types of diets, particularly the saturated fatty acids, really driving obesity, really driving inflammation. So it's something that we just need to balance it out as well. Again, I'm not saying, I'm not one of the people who don't say have anything or of one thing. It's just they're so entwined and so easy to have readily accessible in our diet. It's trying to build that mindset that, we need to be working in other things as well to kind of create that balance within the body. Yes?
Kind of almost as a follow-on to that, would you have any opinion on like a keto diet, a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, the keto diets, there are a lot of different types of diets. The keto diets, what's the one I'm blanking on? The paleo, yeah. A lot of these diets, particularly the keto, it's a good diet. Again, I'm from an endocrinology background. I don't really subscribe to anyone just doing that diet forever. I'm a kind of a balanced type of person. I've done periods where I've gone off it and then I kind of switch and I kind of do something a bit different. Again, in terms of trying to make it easy for people, I don't want to kind of, get into like a massive, this is the best diet, everyone do this. A lot of these diets have extreme benefit to them, particularly depending on your physiology, your needs, the way that you are trying to tap into your body. Utilizing these in the proper format for the proper duration, again, can be very beneficial. But it's really kind of understanding, not everyone needs a keto diet, not everyone needs a high-fat diet. Not everyone is, going to go into this pure protein diet and they're going to get optimal results. That's just, it doesn't work like that. To keeping that balance, that moderation is really key into helping kind of work different things and is the best. Okay, I have one more and then I will hang around and talk to anyone. Yes?
I'm just interested to know what you think of a
A vegan
vegan diet.
diet again, yeah. I have a lot of friends who are vegan. I'm vegan vegetarian for a number of years. I'm not anymore. I kind of keep fluctuating again. There can be a lot of benefit to vegan diets, particularly I'm cautious of saying anything too much because I don't want people to walk away and just have that one thing sit in their head. But particularly in certain circumstances, vegan diets are very good to helping, particularly staying away from animal proteins, animal fats, if you're not trying to feed something, if you know what I mean. But things like that, I do believe that, a lot of things, when they talk about vegan diets, but you need protein. Or your body has a pretty good way of synthesizing the proteins you need. Maybe not all of, you're not getting all of your essential ones, but for the most part, if you have a good vegan diet, and I know some people who don't have good vegan diets, who just purely eat vegetables and that's it. That's not good either. You really need to focus on nutrition particularly well if you're vegan. My sister's a vegan, but she You know, she has large portions of nuts, lentils, beans. She works all of these other things in to make sure she's getting the vitamins, minerals, amino acids. The animal protein isn't essential. It's not something you need. You can get on great with a vegan diet and not miss it. For some people, given their physiological state, they might need it for some periods of time. But again, everyone's different and should be kind of taking that individually. Okay, I will let you go because I keep getting. Thank you, appreciate your time.